Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guests today are Alex McGuire. He's a business development executive at Amentum, and Kelly Wilson. She's program management executive at Amentum. It's good to have you both with us.
Thank you for having us.
Pleasure is ours. Thank you.
And our topic is microelectronics, and that is the object of a lot of study and federal appropriations and strategic thinking these days, because microelectronics are getting more sophisticated, and they are getting, and Kelly, I'd like you to comment on this, so much more tied to the idea of national security, precisely because of the overseas production and so forth. What's your best thinking here?
Well, microelectronics are really at the heart of all of our modern technology. They drive advancements in everything from communication devices to defense systems. They are foundational components that enable smartphones, medical devices, critical defense technologies, like drones and satellites. And as these semiconductors become smaller and more powerful, they really play an increasingly crucial role in shaping the future of artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and 5G networks. Really, the reason it's so important to the national security is because in defense systems, they're designed to withhold harsh environments and prevent vulnerabilities that could compromise So the reliability and integrity of these microelectronics are vital for national security. For example, in defense systems, microelectronics are designed to withstand harsh environments and prevent vulnerabilities that could compromise mission-critical components and operations. The ability to produce trusted, reliable microelectronics domestically reduces the risk of supply chain disruptions and sabotage.
Right, so we need both the capabilities of the latest large-scale chips, and we also need the capability of making them in the United States. So it's both the capabilities and a supply chain issue, you might say.
It is, absolutely, yes.
And Alex, as chips get bigger and more integrated and multi-layer, they're growing this way and they're growing this way, reliability and producing them reliably becomes a challenge, becomes more challenging for the industry. So let's talk about the idea of reliability as well as just how many transistors you can cram in there.
Yep, exactly, Tom. So with most of the world's advanced chips being produced overseas, considering applications for defense and aerospace, figuring out where the minerals come from, the supply chain, packaging, and ultimately fielding for military applications, onshoring is one of the key components to reliability and trust. So knowing what's going into these chips, where they're being made, and who all is involved in that process. And because microelectronics are really the DNA in every system, that reliability and trust is key. So reliability, kind of providing a definition for that, is ensuring that the chips and up to the system level operate as intended in all the environments they may experience. So that may be thermal, so hot or cold environments, maybe radiation from the sun, space, things like that. And for trust, looking at it from a technology stack perspective. So not just the physical chip, but the software, the firmware, the algorithms that comprise that system, ensuring that we know that same provenance of where did it start, who all was involved, and being able to track that. So understanding, again, the supply chain, or protecting that supply chain, we're protecting how these systems operate, that if they fall in the wrong hands, that they aren't going to be compromised, so that we're protecting our warfighters. So really, reliability and trust are the two key components for microelectronics.
Yeah, as you mentioned, so much of it is produced overseas. Even the chips of a very famous high market value manufacturer in the whole AI area, those chips are all made in Taiwan, not by the actually named company. And so that brings up the idea of the CHIPS Act and reshoring, if you will, or returning to the United States, that high-end capability that has gone away. What are you seeing there?
Exactly. So the CHIPS Act is an aggressive move on behalf of the U.S. government to not just solely have the government fund and incentivize these projects, but also balancing with private industry investment. So building and expanding capacity as it relates to semiconductor manufacturing. So that's one aspect. There's also the Defense Production Act, where the U.S. government has authorities to address specific defense industrial-based needs that are critical for military systems. But either way, I think there's more dual-use technology interest in that. So one example is for the production lines. So not just having a specific production line for a part or a chip, but bringing innovative methodologies and ways to, at the end of the line, harden that part to that specification versus having a dedicated line for that.
Right, and you mentioned these are a supply chain issue as well as a technology issue. And sometimes it's a very cyclical industry, especially when you throw in the distribution channel for chips. And so there are occasional shortages. And what are you seeing in ways to deal with that, and how do we have to handle that one?
So Tom, I think when we all think of the implications of semiconductor shortages, we often think of cars lacking creature comforts, right? Your steering wheel may not be heated, but it also has highlighted vulnerabilities with defense and aerospace applications. So a complex weapon system may have hundreds of chips as part of it. So that semiconductor shortage paired with production delays can obviously, one, impact defense stockpiles, but two, impact fielding the latest and greatest systems.
And of course, chips don't exist by themselves. They exist in a package so that they can be mounted in a system and communicate with the rest of the system. Advances in packaging, therefore, and packaging design and also packaging production, it's a kind of a material science challenge. And that's something also coming back to the United States, or we hope it does.
Yes. So advanced packaging is really taking the chip and the package and shrinking it down with the idea of not decreasing performance. So with these integrated packages, you're seeing increases in performance, resistivity to heat and thermal conditions, but it makes it more complex as well. So we talked about the reliability aspect, making sure these chips can withstand radiated environments. So how do you assess and predict performance using these models? Very complex. How do you test them in these test facilities that requires, because they're so stacked, higher energy testing that is currently lacking within the United States. So yes, advanced packaging is very exciting for everybody, but I think it's going to take a while to actually scale and see those implications and effects in defense systems.
All right, and then the CHIPS Act was simply not, I don't think, intended to be a subsidy for an industry that was somehow dying, but the idea was to bolster the production, but also, from an industrial sense, making the industry in the United States competitive. Are you seeing that?
Yeah, so the CHIPS Act is really, as I had said previously, a convergence of government and industry investment. So again, the government's not looking to completely subsidize the industry and expanding these capabilities. They're also using things like tax breaks, grants, things of that nature to, again, incentivize companies on the industrial side to invest substantial sums of money in the billions of dollars, tens of billions, to build these fabs. So with the CHIPS Act, you also have a centralization of one of these efforts, like the National Semiconductor Technology Center, that's going to help, again, expand capacity in manufacturing, but also help build and sustain the semiconductor workforce. So the whole idea there is to reduce the timeline through this onshoring, reduce the timeline from design to prototype, fabrication, and fielding. Again, all while building and sustaining that semiconductor workforce. And I think one note that with all of these efforts is that industry has a much better idea of what the government's demand signals are. So what do they need today? What do they need tomorrow, 10, 20 years down the road? And having an understanding of the demand signal and then having these programs and incentives to invest, I think is going to lead to our continued dominance and retaking the lead in some of these areas.
Right, so it's incumbent on the Defense Department to make sure that what its plans are made manifest to industry so that the planning and so on can happen to be able to supply that demand, and hopefully they'll get the money to carry it out. I guess we all
Right.
hope that one.
Yes,
Exactly.
absolutely.
And Kelly, Alex mentioned workforce, and it's almost like a Sputnik era idea. Do we have the workforce? Because semiconductor design, manufacturing, and production is really sophisticated science and technology. And so talk about some of the workforce issues that go back almost to the high school level, you might say.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's just a ton of focus right now on workforce development and how they're going to address some of the issues and concerns of the workforce shortages that are out there. So the CHIPS Act is enabling and creating 115,000 new jobs that will support regional economic hubs throughout place-based investments. That includes workforce training initiatives across regions like New York and Arizona. So comprehensive studies show that we're projected a gap of around 67,000 jobs in the microelectronics and semiconductor industry by 2030. So that's a very large gap for us to address. Some of those are workforce development initiatives at the national level with universities, K through 12, educational programs, and just expanding the STEM programs throughout the nation are really important ways to help with some of those things. There are a lot of regional partnerships with government labs and universities happening. There's a recruiting piece to that.
And of course, mentoring seems to be typically older to younger, but it actually works both ways, doesn't it?
It does work both ways, yes. So at Amentum, obviously, we value input from all of our employees. So we have our subject matter experts that may have 20 or 30 years in industry that are really helping develop the newer generation, the next generation of workforce. But they are also helping mentor their leaders as they have learned the latest and greatest technologies in their education.
Sure, I guess where rocket ships were the appealing technology that galvanized the nation, and what did John F. Kennedy say, bring the best of what we can do, I'm paraphrasing, together. In many ways, nowadays chips, semiconductors, microelectronics is really that same galvanizing type of item, even though you can't see what's going on inside it.
Yes.
Just maybe give us a brief overview of what Amentum is doing specifically. And I know you can't name your clients, and many of these are sensitive situations, but generally, what are the capabilities there?
So Amentum is doing a lot with workforce development. We're helping our customers kind of with meeting their critical demand signal from the programs. We do that by going out and recruiting talent that they may not have access to being able to get to. So
Sure.
we have a number of subject matter experts that we bring to the table and just years and years of experience in the microelectronics semiconductor industry.
That could be a slogan, Amentum for augmenting. Kind of goes together, a
There
little
you go.
musical there, all
Yes.
right? One of the big problems in semiconductors, and this again goes back so many years, but it's more crucial now maybe, is the counterfeit question. And what do you see there, and how can government kind of stamp out that one?
Sure. So counterfeit microelectronics are a huge threat to the integrity of the systems that we're working with. And a counterfeit part can really reduce the integrity of an entire system. One part could. So we really need to focus on the supply chain integrity, utilizing artificial intelligence and blockchain technologies to track and verify the origin of semiconductors, those components to mitigate risk from counterfeit products being entered into our defense system supply chain.
Okay, and these products that are made have a short life cycle in many cases because of the constant advances. You know, if you look at some of the big semiconductor leading companies, there's a new generation, you know, every couple of years. And yet the platforms that they go into for government may last decades. You mentioned Javelin missiles and so forth, and there's so many programs, there's thousands of them you could name. What about the sustainment and life cycle management so that the government has access to that capability even when, say, a chip may no longer be made and may even be out of the supply chain altogether?
Yes, Tom. So as you pointed out, these primary weapon systems or major weapon systems can be in service for decades. So as we see the battlefield and the nature of warfare changing and evolving into requiring increased data processing and new threats that may not have been known even 5 years ago, that really addressing that threat and those requirements at the chip level. So as these systems are fielded and they go through upgrade cycles, really taking the opportunity to look at how can we help our customers think through these problem sets of designing and producing chips and fielding chips and testing them to be able to, again, handle that increased data processing requirement and be resilient against near-peer threats. So one other aspect, as we talked about, was obsolescence management. So how do you try and forecast some of these parts potentially being no longer made in 5 years? And again, going back to authorities the government has with the Defense Production Act to shore up some of those capabilities if required. Or if that's not an option, finding an alternative that will satisfy that requirement. So the security vulnerabilities is obviously a touchy subject, but we need to help our customers be proactive in understanding what those threats are. That there's not a single company or a single government agency that knows all these threats. So helping them understand what is the cutting edge of what's the threats that are out there and how we can help protect and mitigate against those so that our systems, going back to the reliability and trust aspect, that the systems operate as intended when they're needed.
Right. Well, one thing for sure, this technology is not going backwards. It's going to keep advancing, and so we need that kind of input to keep the government up with what the latest technology is, and again, as you say, to meet the strategic goals of the country. And we thank you for those thoughts. Today's guests have been Alex McGuire. He's a business development executive at Amentum, and we also heard from Kelly Wilson. She is a program management executive also at Amentum. I'm Federal Drive host Tom Temin. You've been watching this discussion, Top Voices. For more on this discussion, please visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search Amentum.